Hello, everybody. Welcome to the More Than Able podcast.
Episode 8.
Episode 8. Wow. 2 months already.
Yeah. It feels like we were just sitting here recording the last episode.
Well, we were sitting right here.
Yeah. A week ago.
A week ago. That week went by really fast.
Yeah.
And this next week, for us personally, is probably going to be like
the most
a lightning
chaotic
strike
week ever.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know us on a personal level, if you were to see our garage right now, it is full of boxes. We are moving from Texas to Arkansas, which is where we had originally moved from when we moved to Texas almost 10 years ago, almost 9.5 years ago now. And so God has called us back to Arkansas, which is where our family is at. So we're excited about that, and we know God's got big things in store for not just us, but also our kids. And I believe there's going to be things that are going to come from our podcast that's going to be part of that, and also our time with Reengage through our church. I think he's going to use that to continue some type of marriage ministry or strengthening marriages within our move. So, yeah, this next week for us is going to be kind of crazy.
Yeah. We move. Well, today that we're recording on is Wednesday. We move a week from this Saturday.
Yeah.
So we're
10
moving
days.
on the 16th.
Yep. And today is the 6th. So we got 10 days and we will be in Arkansas.
Which is crazy.
Yes, it is. But so on this week, we thought we would talk about baggage. And not
so suitcases, luggage,
boxes. I mean, we got all sorts of
bags.
baggage we're fixing to move. No, not that kind of baggage.
Maybe emotional baggage.
Yeah,
Maybe
I was going to say, what kind of
about.
baggage would we discuss in marriage? Yeah, emotional baggage. So the type of baggage we're discussing this week would be intangible things, such as feelings, circumstances, beliefs, things that just get in the way, not physical things, but things that you've dealt with.
Yeah. I think if you're a visual person, you can visualize some suitcases. And
yeah, that's a good visual
we actually, you know what? Maybe I can find it and link it. Our church did a sermon on baggage a while ago, and I remember they had a ton of luggage on the stage, and they were like given that visual image of how, like, if you're trying to be close to one another, but you have all this baggage. I mean, they were piling it on themselves, and how heavy that gets, and how it comes between you.
Well, and I think he even had some that he was trying to pull behind him when they were trying to get closer together, and he talked about how things can be pulling you back when you're trying to get closer to your spouse.
Yeah,
because of the weight of it.
It was really good. So I'm going to try to find it, and so I can link it below, because that's
I think that'd be good.
Really great, because I think it probably will go into goes a different direction, maybe a deeper level than what we're going to talk about tonight. But
well, and if you are a visual person, I would definitely recommend, if you want to listen to sermons or watch sermons, check out morechurch.com. That is our church.
More.church.
Oh, more.church.
More.church is the website.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad you knew that. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But our pastor is a very, he gives a ton of visual references to better explain.
There's a lot of illustrations.
To better explain what he's talking about. So if you'd like to see those type of explanations, I would definitely encourage you to check that out.
Yeah.
But so what does marriage look like? Or I'm sorry, what does baggage look like in our marriage? So what's that look like for you? So
I think, in the, most literal sense of it, it just looks like bringing in stuff. When I think about baggage, I think about luggage and stuff like that, and the stuff that you put in there. You use baggage to carry around your stuff. So baggage coming into marriage is
me
stuff.
Carrying all my junk.
Yeah,
it's
literally emotionally you're carrying all of your junk into your marriage from your past, whether that's past relationships, your childhood. It could be past friendships or past marriages, or just anything that you've walked through in your life that created
attached.
something inside of you that felt not good.
Yeah, it's something that's still attached to you, something that you haven't dealt with. And it could even be things that you know that you're still carrying, but it could also be things that you don't know that you're carrying, things that your brain has suppressed memories.
Yeah.
Because baggage can be trauma.
Yeah.
And trauma can be detrimental, so much so that your body wants to suppress those things. Suppression doesn't get rid of it, but your mind is trying to protect you from those things.
Well, and I think even if you're suppressing things, you can find yourself being triggered by certain things, and you don't even understand where that comes from.
Why.
Being triggered by something, and it causes you to feel fearful or anxious or angry, but you don't understand why you're being triggered.
Well, and I know one of the things you've talked about before, where you've had anxiety with driving or being on the road, and you've talked about how even as a kid, you remember being scared while in the car.
Yeah, for sure.
And feeling like, I think you talked about when you would go to your grandmother's house, feeling like you were going to go off the mountainside.
Yeah, like we would drive into my grandma's house. We had to go through a little town called Eureka, which if you've ever been there, it's just curves, like hairpin curves, and there's just nothing over the side.
Yeah.
And so I remember just looking out the window and having what now I know are intrusive thoughts, but just thinking I'm not going to make it to my grandma's. Like, I'm going to die before I get there because I'm going to, like, I would actually have these almost like visions of like going off of the road and like rolling down the hill. And that's something I still struggle with that today. Like, it's just a part of the way that my brain works or something. And that is maybe some baggage that I will never know where it comes from. It's maybe just the way that my brain works.
Yeah, because you've never been in a car accident.
No, I literally have never. Well, I had a friend rear end me once in high school at a very low speed. I was going to say, but that's I've never been in a car accident, and so there's no trauma there. It's just I do think, which I'm sure we'll probably do a whole episode at some point on mental health, but I think part of anxiety, there's just a part of it where your brain works in a certain way, like
or doesn't work in a certain way.
I have a very visual brain. I have a very vivid imagination. I have crazy weird dreams, like very vivid dreams sometimes. And so I think that maybe just having that active imagination, has been part of what caused, these thoughts or anxious feelings. And, that's carried over into, my adult life. But that is a form of baggage because, my anxiety has affected us, on many occasions.
Yeah, because there's been many times that we've been in the car and something that is relatively normal for me may completely terrorize you.
Yeah.
Like I know there was one day we were about to get stuck in traffic on the highway, and I was like, well, I can still get off, meaning I can still drive through the grass median and get on the service road.
Oh my goodness.
And it was, for me, it was a super simple, I'm doing 10 mile an hour. Like I'm not even going fast. And before I pull off the highway, I get even slower. But I just drove through the grass and I got onto the service road.
It was not a flat spot of grass. Like, I didn't know he was going to do it, and all of a sudden, we're, like, dropping off of the road. And I think I was looking down at my phone, and then I looked up, and all of a sudden, we're just dropping down off the road. I don't know what's happening. Yeah, it freaked me out. I think I ended up in tears. Yeah, you did. And, yeah, it was really bad.
But something like that, like, it affects... That's an example of what affects you that doesn't affect me. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what baggage is. And it could even be as simple as something that affects you on the current, like bringing current frustrations, whether that's from work or school or, whatever the situation may be. But if you bring those situations home and that your day is still affecting you, well, then that can affect the way you treat your spouse or your family.
Yeah, I think it's easy to look at emotional baggage as just those really large things like childhood trauma or abuse, or, you know, something really big that you're going to bring into your marriage and it's going to be detrimental. But I think just those daily things, like, you know, you said you have a bad day at work and you come home, and instead of checking yourself at the door and reminding yourself, like, my family is not my coworkers, they have nothing to do with my job.
Yeah.
I have to put myself in a different headspace.
Yep.
Instead of that, you come in the house, you snap at your wife, you snap at your kids, or vice versa. You snap at your husband and you snap at your kids. And then, you know, all hell breaks loose in your house because of something that happened at work that has nothing to do with your family.
Exactly.
But you brought that baggage into your home and you allowed it to affect your family.
You pulled it home with you.
And so, you know, baggage is, it encompasses a lot of different things. So, which we were kind of talking about already, but, you know, some examples of what some of the bigger baggages are that you would bring in from your past. I know for me, insecurity is one that I've brought in. I think you had mentioned that.
Same for me.
Same for you
I think
as
it's
well.
just a different level.
Well, and how, like, so if you're bringing insecurity into your marriage, what does that look like? I mean, how does that affect your marriage?
Well, not feeling good enough, you know, or always needing validation, you know.
Yeah.
And we talked a lot about my affairs and what led to that. And one of the big things that led to that was me always needing that validation. And one of the questions that I remember you asking me that has always stuck with me was, you had asked me if you would have ever been enough.
Yeah.
And I told you no, that you would have never been enough. And it wasn't because of you.
Yeah, it wasn't, you weren't saying
something,
you aren't good enough.
Yeah, exactly. I wasn't saying you weren't good enough. I was saying that the hole that I had inside of me, the lack that I had inside of my heart, the lack that I had in my emotions, no person would have been enough to fill that.
Yeah.
And so validation is a big part of it. Like you mentioned, insecurity. But I know because of past relationships that I've been in, not feeling good enough, which I think I also kind of hit on that when we were talking about my affairs.
Yeah. Well, and, you know, I think emotional baggage that's big like that can come in from the outside, or it can be created within your marriage. You know, we've been, you know, very transparent in talking about your affairs and, you know, kind of how that played out and what that's caused. And, you know, that created some emotional baggage in me that I had to deal with, because it, you know, I brought insecurities in, but that just made the insecurities worse.
My baggage gave you more baggage.
Yeah, it made me feel like I wasn't good enough.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, I had all those questions of, you know, what did I do, or what could I have done? Was I not enough? Like, did I not give him, did we not have sex enough times a week? Or did, you know, I not love him good enough? Or did he feel like, you know, I just wasn't a good enough wife or mom? Or, you know, how could I have changed it? I went through so many scenarios in my head trying to rack my brain figuring out how I caused this, because I thought in my mind I had to have caused this. Like, I pushed him away in some regard. And it took me a really long time to understand. I don't think it was until you went to counseling and really kind of got a firm grasp on what happened, and, you know, to cause you to do those things.
Yeah, because I know one of the things you asked me a lot of is why.
Yeah.
Like, why did you do this? And it wasn't just a simple one answer.
Well, no, and for a long time it was kind of like I don't really know.
Yeah, like I could give you lots of I could tell you lots of different reasons why I thought it led to me having my affairs, but there was never this concrete, this is why. And because of this, all these other reasons that I've told you were all part of it. But here's the foundation of why.
Yeah. And until you had that concrete why, like, it left me kind of out in no man's land, still wondering, like,
could it happen again?
Yeah, could it happen again? And also, like, was I a problem and he just doesn't want to tell me because he doesn't want to hurt my feelings? And so there was still all of this doubt and just uncertainty that was swirling in my mind, and like I said, it wasn't until you went to counseling and kind of got that concrete answer that I was finally able to start, squashing those things and realizing, okay, that's not true.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
But there were still lingering insecurities there of just still not feeling good enough. Because even though I found out, like, okay, well, this is something from his childhood, made him feel these things, and so this is the reason why he did the things he did. Well, it doesn't erase the fact that you still did the things that you did,
Yeah.
And so those things still have consequences, and that was part of the consequences. Was I had to struggle with the insecurity and figure out how to navigate that.
And it wasn't something that I could change within you to help you.
Yeah.
Like, those insecurities came because of what I did, but there wasn't something that I could do. Like, I could have done all the things, but ultimately it come down to what you were willing to do to help strengthen yourself and to rid yourself of those insecurities. I think that's one of the things I've realized over the last year going through Reengage is I can be there and support you and love you and pray for you and encourage you and do all the things. But ultimately, even though I was the one that caused the damage to you, you're responsible for the change within yourself.
Yeah.
The growth, the health. Because I can't do that for you, and vice versa.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and the insecurity thing, I mean, it's something that I still have to work on today, and something I learned earlier this year was that insecurity is a form of pride, because insecurity comes from like looking at yourself. Like, if I'm insecure about maybe how I'm dressed, well, that's very much a me problem. Like, that's worrying how others perceive me, how they're going to look at me. It's me.
Yeah.
And so I've spent a lot of time this year trying to like navigate that and figure out how do I shift my mindset from that to, I don't want to have an attitude of I don't care what anybody thinks about me, because that's just not my personality.
Yeah.
But how do I care what others think without it going so far as to cause genuine insecurity in me, where I walk into a room and I just feel small?
I was going to say, your biggest concern walking into a room is what other people are thinking.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that so many people think about. They're like, what are they thinking about me? Are they talking about me? When in reality, most people are probably having the same exact thoughts.
Yeah.
Or
so nobody's really looking at you.
I was going to say, or nobody's looking at you at all because they're worried about what everybody else may be thinking.
Yeah.
And that's insecurity. So insecurity, which is lacking self-worth. And so for me, a lot of that come from my first marriage, my previous marriage, but also just from relationships before my ex-wife. And so a lot of that looked like, for me, a fear of failure and worry or doubt that I wouldn't be good enough. And so with my ex, I won't go into a lot of details. We can maybe talk about it at a different episode, but I was doing everything I felt like I could possibly do, but the response that I was getting was, it wasn't enough. You're not doing good enough. You need to do more. Why are you not doing more? What you're doing is not enough. And so I think part of that is baggage for me. And so bringing that into our relationship and our engagement and our marriage, there was this fear of, I'm going to do it again. I'm not going to be good enough. I'm not going to produce enough. I'm not going to be wealthy enough. I'm not going to love you right. I'm not going to love you enough. I'm not going to be a good enough father. And all of those things come out of a place of insecurity. And I think part of it too is not looking to the right source for my self-worth. Looking at what the world says. Or, obviously what you say and what you feel about me matters immensely, but ultimately it should be what God says.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I think we talked about that on a previous episode about, making him our true source,
exactly.
that, our happiness, our joy, those things don't come from our spouse. That if we're looking to our spouse for those things, then it'll never be enough.
Yeah.
Like, I'll never be good enough for you if I'm your source of all of that,
Yeah,
and vice
exactly.
versa.
Yeah. And so a lot of what I dealt with my ex and previous relationships was baggage that I brought into our marriage, and what things were spoken over me and to me, I brought into our marriage, thinking that you would be the same way,
Yeah.
which is part of, like I said, there's multiple things to what led to my affairs, but that's part of it, and the validation. But also, it's just a lack of love for myself, not feeling like I was going to be good enough.
Yeah.
And that's because of the things that have been spoken to me and over me over the years.
Yeah. Yeah. Words are powerful.
And something you can never take back, no matter how much you apologize or say you're sorry or say you wish you'd never said those things. Once it's said, it is said.
Oh yeah. I think we've probably each created, baggage in our marriage currently because of words that we've said, that creates that emotional baggage where, like, it's like literally you just handed me a heavy bag. Now I've got to carry the weight of that because your words cut deep.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say this just so everybody that's listening realizes, is that baggage is something that we can let go of.
Yeah.
And it's something that can be healed. And just because I've created baggage for Heather and Heather has created baggage for me, it doesn't mean that it's something we both are currently carrying.
Right.
And that's something that we have to always, like we talked about, the baggage could be current, but it's something we always have to be working on healing from, moving past, and forgiving.
Mm-hmm. Well, and just like, when you go on a trip, you get home from a trip, you got to unpack your luggage. Like, all of that baggage that you brought home from your trip has to be
leave it
unpacked. And some people's baggage is a little fuller than others and takes a little longer to unpack. And so, you can't compare one person's baggage to another and say, well, I got over my baggage in, X amount of time. Why are you still dealing with yours?
Yeah, because, like we've been talking, I've been married before. You hadn't. Yeah, you've been in relationships, but you hadn't been married. Mm-hmm. And even if you had, my relationship with my ex would have been different than if you had been previously married.
Yeah, for sure. And so everybody's baggage is different. And it's, I think it's really easy, especially in a marriage, you're with each other all the time, to compare things and to almost be in competition with one another without realizing that's what you're doing, where you say like if it'd be easy to be sitting here and talking about our past and almost trying to one up each other, like, oh yeah, well, I dealt with this.
Yeah.
And that was way worse. You don't even know.
Yeah.
I can imagine a conversation like that where you're trying to one up each other, like it's a competition of whose trauma was worse, which is insane. Like, that's insane to me that
because it's not
you would
healthy.
Compete in that way. I mean, there can be
and
healthy
no benefit
healthy
to that.
competition in a game maybe, but like, this is your partner. You're the person that you love the most, the person that's on your side. Like, you don't want to compete with them. You don't want to say, well, my baggage is worse than yours. You should be there to support one another.
Because we're a team.
Yeah.
You don't see teammates fighting one another. You see those teammates working together to fight to
the opponent.
Defeat the opponent,
Yeah.
Correct. And who's the opponent in our lives? Satan.
Well, Satan.
And so what Satan wants to do is he wants to come in and divide us.
Yeah.
Because that weakens us, and then he has a better chance of trying to overcome us.
Yeah.
And so in Reengage, we've made these little tote bags for everybody. Or Heather made these tote bags for everybody. I didn't make them. But they just say team and then whatever the last name is of the couple. And so, of course, ours would say Team Burleson. And that was something I brought up a couple weeks ago to everybody at Reengage. I told them, I said, pick up your bag. What does your bag say? And I said, on your bag, it says team and your name. I said, and that's what your spouse is. Your spouse is your teammate. He is or she is your partner, and we are supposed to be fighting together, not against each other.
Yeah.
But so some of the baggage that can be really common, stuff that maybe, me and Heather haven't ever had to experience, has been like divorced parents. Both of our parents have been married 45 plus years.
I'm not going to say how many because I'm not 100% sure. I think my parents got married in 1980. Yeah, 1980.
I think you're right.
However many years that is.
44, almost 44.
Yeah.
So, yeah, 40 plus years, I'd say both of our parents. So, that's something that we'd never experienced. But I know, and that both of our parents have had their own struggles, had their own battles, their own fights. Mm-hmm. And that was things that I seen growing up. That was things that you seen growing up.
Oh, yeah.
And so those type of things can be baggage that both of us bring into our relationship. But also it could look like abuse.
Yeah.
And abuse is a small word that covers a whole lot. That could be physical. It could be sexual. It could be verbal. It could be emotional. And it could be something as simply as, well, it's not as simple, but not feeling loved.
Yeah.
I always remember my parents telling me that they loved me.
Yeah, I don't think there was ever a time for me growing up where I ever felt unloved. There were probably moments where I was in trouble, where I was like, my parents hate me.
Yeah.
But like looking back, I never felt like I had parents that didn't love me. They always made me feel loved. I always felt safe in my home. That was not something that, I had to deal with. And I'm super grateful for that. And I, still feel that love now. And now my kids get to experience that love from them. But there are a lot of people who,
don't get that.
Grow up in a home where they just don't have parents that care. They have absent parents or maybe
parents that didn't feel loved when they were a kid or never got
so
told that they were
loved.
loved. So exactly. I think my dad has talked about that before, that his father never told him until he was actually an adult that he loved him.
Yeah.
And so something that my dad had to learn how to do was tell me and my sisters that he loved us. And what did that look like? What that was hugs and kisses and cuddles. And that's the same thing we do with our kids.
Yeah.
But I think we always, parents always want to be better for their kids than what they had, not just in the physical things, but emotional. And so I always try to build upon what I had as a foundation as a kid, feeling loved.
Yeah.
And so something else that we never had to deal with was we talked about divorced parents. So a one-parent household.
Yeah.
Or even if it's a situation where one of the parents passed away.
Yeah.
And what kind of void that leaves in your life.
Yeah.
And I've seen that with kids that I went to school with, that they didn't have a father figure in their life. And not just the masculinity that a son needs to understand what it means to be a man, but also so that he has an example of what that looks like, so that he understands what it means to be a man as you grow up, to be a husband. What does it look like to be a husband?
Yeah.
Or even what does it look like to be an uncle or a brother? What does that look like? But if you're living with just one spouse, with just one parent, and I'm just speaking from the male side, obviously, but I'm sure it would be the same for a girl.
Oh yeah, like there were things that I learned from my mom that if I would have only had my dad would have been a lot more difficult or a lot more awkward, because he never had a period. So like how would that have worked out? And we laugh about that, but I can't imagine having to go through that.
That would be really awkward.
That's awkward enough for a young girl to have her mom talk to her about that stuff.
Yeah.
I remember talking to Eden about that stuff, and she hated it. It was so awkward for the longest time to talk about her period. And so it's just something that you need a mom for.
Yep.
And so, and I will say, if you're listening and you are, you're a single parent, make sure you're in community. Like, find
Absolutely.
a church to get planted in and get in community, so that you may only have one parent that lives in the household, but you can have multiple parents that are shepherding your child.
Yes.
And being there for
Yes.
them and showing them the way they need to go, and just being that other parent that they don't have, because it's not fair. It's not fair to a child. They didn't choose that, but they can have just as much, if not more, than what you can get in a 2-parent household if you're in community and you have all of those people surrounding you.
Well, and like one of the things I mentioned was the masculinity. Like, I remember, and I've still seen men in my life now, not that are part of our everyday lives, but there is people that I have seen, men that I have seen, that are very feminine. They're not gay. They're not bi. They're none of those. They're just very feminine, and it's very apparent that they did not have a father figure. They did not have a masculine figure in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, having other people, a community in your life, a community of believers, is huge. I have more brothers than I can count. And that's not because they're blood. They're not my parents' sons, but they're brothers in Christ that God has given me. And every single one of them has impacted me differently,
Mm-hmm.
but they've all impacted me on some level.
Yeah.
And so much so that they've also impacted Hayden.
Yeah.
Like, I know for one, like, Hayden can see me and say, well, that's just my dad. But when he has other men in his life that are surrounding him, then he has multiple people, multiple masculine men, multiple Christian men that are impacting his life. And that's something I would have thought to pray about for him to have, but I know that's going to impact him on the long term.
Yeah, for sure.
But so 1-parent households, what else? What other kind of things?
Some of the other things that we wrote down here that is baggage that maybe you could have experienced that you're going to bring into a marriage is betrayal. So maybe a former partner cheating, or maybe growing up you had you seen one of your parents cheat on the other parent. So something else would be losing a parent, which we kind of touched on, or a sibling.
Yeah.
So that creates baggage, a whole lot of baggage. Like, I can't even imagine the baggage that would create to go through such a devastating loss. Like, that's difficult to handle, I'm sure, as an adult. I can't even imagine, losing someone that you love that's so close to you as a child, when your brain is still developing and you don't understand yet how to deal with that loss.
It could even be that Heather's talking about losing a sibling. Well, how does that affect your parents? As a father, I could only imagine the impact that it would have on me and you if we would have lost a child.
Yeah.
And what kind of baggage that creates within both of us, but then also within our family.
Yeah.
And how does that affect our kids?
Yeah.
One of the other ones, which I think probably everybody has heard this, is PTSD.
Yeah.
But that's not, I think it's so commonly referenced to the military.
Yeah.
Because it seems like that's really where it became common to hear it at.
Yeah, I think that's where it became more widely known about, is, these soldiers coming back from war and
with PTSD,
and they have, they have this issue where, like, things are triggering them and they're, fearful and just scared of everything. And, they come to realize there's this thing called post-traumatic stress disorder, which is basically just extreme stress that you feel after something traumatic happens. And trauma doesn't just come from having explosions and seeing people die. Those are really big traumas. But traumas are betrayal, like
everything we just hit on.
Like, something that my counselor told me whenever I first started seeing her was, you have experienced a trauma, in talking about Terry's affairs.
Yeah.
And I almost felt guilty taking that on, like saying I experienced trauma, because I felt like, well, I didn't experience war. I didn't see people die. I didn't, experience something gruesome. And so it felt wrong of me to say I had experienced a trauma.
Well, and that's because the world discounts it.
Yeah.
The world says the only way you can experience PTSD is all those things you just said.
Yeah.
But it's not. Like you said, if you define it as what it is, it's a post-traumatic
Yeah.
situation.
Well, and what my counselor told me is your brain doesn't understand the difference between trauma. Like whether it's because you did see something gruesome, or you were in a car accident, or you were cheated on.
Yeah.
Or, like all these things are traumatic to your brain.
Yeah.
It causes a trauma response in your brain, and your brain doesn't differentiate between the traumas. It's just
trauma.
It's just trauma.
Yeah. Well, and when I lived in Missouri, I was on the fire department there, and the fire department that I was part of had a rescue boat because it was near a big lake. And couple of the things that I had experienced would be considered trauma. But one in particular, we had gotten a call for a swimming accident. And then within the call, we had gotten a response back while we were traveling to the call that it was a drowning, that it was no longer a rescue. And it come to be that this guy had been floating for weeks. And I won't go into all the details.
Thank you.
But the event of getting somebody out of the water that had been in the water for weeks dead was very traumatic.
Yeah.
And what that looked like and what it took to get that person out of the water. Also, there was a situation where we had gotten a call for a heart attack, and it was an elderly man, and he was cooking dinner, and he had opened his stove, and in the middle of trying to get his dinner out of the oven, he had a heart attack, and he fell through the glass of the oven while the oven was still on. And so, it was a very gruesome thing. And so, yeah, PTSD can be very gruesome, but it can also be like what you said, can be very an everyday, something that happens all the time. If you think about it, how regular an occurrence of a situation of somebody being cheated on. And that's trauma.
Yeah. So we've kind of talked already about, where trauma comes from, but it's, usually in your childhood, your life experiences can come from just day-to-day frustrations at work. It can come from big life changes or season changes.
Yeah.
I know that we are entering a huge season change in our life where we're transitioning from living in Texas to living in Arkansas. And, there's potential for baggage from that, that is going to be emotionally a lot. We're leaving.
And it already has been.
Yeah, we're leaving our home of 9.5 years. We're leaving behind a whole lot of friends. We're leaving behind a church family that we love, but we feel like this is where God is taking us. And so we have to trust that, he has something, even better for us there.
Well, and I think a big difference for us going through this is, one, we've been praying about this since July.
Yeah.
Not to move us, but we've been praying about what God has for us since July. We've reached out to mentors, pastors, elders in our church, trusted spiritual leaders, and just close friends, and had them praying with us as well. But also, we've had a lot of conversations. We've had a lot of sit down with the kids and discussing this and what does it look like. And I know that we will even after. And I know that there'll be lots of prayers even after. And I know there'll be people still praying with us after the move. And, I met with a friend of mine a couple of nights ago, and one of the things that he talked about, he said, I believe wholeheartedly you guys are doing exactly what God has called you to do. And he said, because you're doing what God has called you to do, and because it's not about you, it's about what God's plan is, Satan is going to attack. And because he's going to attack, you have to be prepared for that attack. and you have to be ready to fight. And that's, I think I mentioned that to you the other night about what he had said, and you were kind of like, oh man. And because he doesn't want to, he wants to stop the progress that God is trying to make. And so, the attack is going to come, and that can be in multiple things. I think right now for us, it looks like stress, worry, fear. But I think once we get moved, it's going to look like a whole different situation.
Yeah.
And so it's just a matter of us being consistent with each other, being consistent in our prayer, being consistent to go back to God's word, and going back to the notes that we've made, and knowing that the decision we made was the right decision, and it was the decision that God called us to.
Yeah. So just to wrap up, we're going to kind of talk a little bit about how do we deal with baggage. So we've talked about all the different kinds of baggage that you can bring in and what that looks like, but how do you deal with it? I mean, once you've identified it and this is my baggage, now what do I do with it?
Well, one, counseling.
Yeah.
And don't discount it. But I would also say not just counseling, but Christian counseling, because a counselor can give you all sorts of ways or tools to try to cope with certain things. But if you have a Christian counselor that is rooted in God's word, that prays before your session starts with you and prays after your session ends with you, that's bringing God into the situation. And there's nothing better that we can do than bring God into every situation that we're facing. So, yes, counseling. For me, I went through a very strenuous type of counseling called intense. Yeah, that's a better word for it. Called EMDR, which if you're interested in what that is and what it looks like, you can always do some research on it. But it was very intense, and it was very extreme for me as far as the emotions go. I talked earlier about suppressed memories, and that's something that EMDR brought up for me. There was things that I had suppressed that I needed to work through. And so counseling, obviously, but communication,
with
me and you,
other.
with each other, me and you communicating.
Yeah, talking, like if you have baggage that you've brought into your marriage and your spouse doesn't know about it, they should. And,
yes,
like we said before, you're a team. And, if you have a spouse that you don't feel like you can communicate those things with, then counseling is probably the best place to start, and, trying to figure out how you guys communicate better, so that you can feel safe to do that. But just sharing that with your spouse and saying, hey, like, I've realized I have this baggage that I brought in, I didn't realize it, but, I've realized it now. And so,
absolutely.
I want you to know about it. And who knows what that conversation leads to.
Well, and that's like what I was talking about earlier, how I didn't even realize what the foundation of the reasoning behind my affairs was until I went to counseling.
Yeah.
But then I was able to talk to you about it.
Yeah.
And which was good, not just for me, but also for you.
Yeah. And if you're unsure of what communication looks like, listen to our last episode. It was all about communication.
All about communication. I think I may have mentioned this already, but prayer.
Yeah.
Praying, not just how to deal with it, but I would say also, it talks in God's word about, God, search my heart, find the things within me that I need to work on. And so I would say maybe that's something you pray about. Maybe you pray, God, what is the baggage that I have? What are the things that I'm carrying with me on my daily that is affecting me, that it's affecting my spouse, that's affecting my family, and reveal those things to me so that I can process those things.
Yeah. Another way to deal with baggage is through trusted self-help resources. So that can look like books by Christian authors, websites, Christian websites. So if you could just go on Google, like you can literally type anything into Google, if you are dealing with anxiety. You could go to Google and type in, how to deal with emotional baggage of anxiety in marriage. And you can even add Christian on the end of that word.
Yeah.
And it will pull up Christian websites that have articles about that.
Yeah.
You could do the same to look up books. I mean, there's so many resources out there. There are far more than I could even probably fathom or know about. And, I think it's important that, if you're a Christian and you want that good faith-based help, that you're seeking out those things that are Christian-based.
Yeah, don't just seek out what the world says that you should do.
Because there are a lot of crazy things out there.
Absolutely.
And the last thing you need is a book telling you to go buy these special healing crystals that will make you all better or something.
And that's the last thing you need. Or, if you have a counselor and it's not a Christian counselor and you're getting, maybe some weird vibes, or they're saying things like, maybe you should do, I don't know, yoga. Nothing's wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with yoga. I'm just saying, but like, if they're not giving you biblical, solid foundational things, maybe find a different counselor. I'm not saying that counselor can't help you, but if you are a Christian and that is your foundation in your life, then why would you not want everything that you are seeking out to help you have the same foundation?
Yeah. And I will say, there may be people who maybe they are using a health insurance plan to pay for counseling, and I don't know what that looks like. And sometimes that might look like I can only go to certain places or people, and those might not be Christian based. And I think my advice there would be to pray for discernment in what advice you're getting from your counselor, that God would basically what was that saying? Tristan said it once. He's chew the meat and spit out the bones. So praying for that discernment, that like I would be able to get the good stuff from my counselor, and anything that is not good or true or from you, like to just keep it from my mind.
Exactly. Yeah, I really liked when he talked about that, because there's always going to be something that we don't need, or maybe that's something that's spoken incorrectly. Well, because we're all human. When we all make mistakes, we all say things maybe not the proper way. But yeah, if we are praying for discernment, but also something he's talked about here recently is ask God to help you discern your discernment.
Yeah.
And making sure that what you are hearing and what you're digesting is what God wants you to hear.
Yeah.
But, other things you could do, if you got a pastor in your life, you could reach out to them. And if you don't have a pastor in your life, well, find a church, and maybe the church you go to, try it out for a month. And if that's not where you feel like you're supposed to be, well, try another one. There's nothing wrong with going from one church and realizing, okay, well, this is not where I'm supposed to be, and then try another one and do it again. Go for a month. And me and Heather made the decision when we were going to go to life groups. We're like, we're going to try this life group, and if this isn't where we're supposed to be, then we're going to try another one. Yeah. But if you've got a mentor in your life, a trusted friend in your life, those are also people that you could go to.
Yeah.
A big one would be, reading God's word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then the last one that we have written down is journaling. And that's something that I've used, a lot over the years, and it's looked different in different seasons. I think, sometimes it looks like more like a diary, where, I'm just writing things down about my day. And then sometimes it's looked more like a prayer journal, where I'm actually writing out prayers to God and things that, I'm wanting to see happen. Or sometimes it's just a bunch of random thoughts, where it's like I have just this Rolodex of thoughts constantly in my head, and I need to get them out. And so I'm just like jotting them down. So there's a lot of different ways that you can journal, but just the process of getting things from your head out and onto paper is really therapeutic, and it helps a lot.
Especially if God is just speaking something, like you said, really short to you, write it down. Even if it doesn't make sense in the moment, write it down. I've done the same here recently. I've been trying to take a lot of notes, and I wouldn't say journal so much, but just writing things down that God has spoken to me. And maybe in the moment it doesn't make sense, but I went back this week and read over some stuff, and it just was like a smack in the face.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was thankful for that.
Yeah.
But so.
Well, I think we're out of time.
We are past out of time. We keep saying we're going to keep these things short, and we just keep going long.
We talk a lot.
But
hopefully it's good. Hopefully you're not like completely bored and like, oh my God, when is this going to end?
I think they're turning us off if they're having that thought.
If you made it to me saying that, then you can drop a comment and tell us that we're not too long, that it's okay.
No, don't tell us that, because we might even go longer. So
no.
Well, I hope y'all have got something out of this, even if it was just a little bit. And as always, if you've ever got any questions or concerns, or you just want somebody to talk to or pray to, reach out to us.
No, pray with, not pray to.
Yeah.
We're not praying to us.
Pray
Don't
to
worship
No,
us.
Absolutely not. Reach out to us. We will pray with you and for you.
Yes.
So hopefully y'all are enjoying this as much as we are, and we appreciate y'all listening.
Yeah. Have a great week.
We will talk to y'all later.
Bye.